Hi, how are you doing? Well, first let me start with this. Thank you for being here today before I ask you how you're doing, because I know that you've been caring a lot lately if you're here to talk to me. But I really appreciate you for taking your time to focus on yourself. And so before we get into anything, maybe heavy or big, let's, if it's okay with you, just start with some opening questions so I can get to know you better. So maybe you'll be more comfortable talking to me if I can know your background and a little bit more about you. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. To get started here, let's talk about religion, or your spiritual identity. What comes to mind if I were to ask you something like that about your religion
Sure.
or your spiritual identity?
I'm an atheist. I was raised Catholic, but I don't define as anything now.
Okay. All right. Um, so you said you were raised Catholic. So is that like part of your life? Is this helpful or hurtful to you?
Well,
Or you said you were atheist, so I guess what I'm asking is there a negative connotation with that? Does that impact your daily life?
so that's a complicated question. Let's see. My parents are Catholic. They kicked me out when they found out I was bi. Um, Now that they're living with me again, I take them to church, but I wait in the car because I am not welcome. So you could say religion is part of my life in the sense that I am being dragged kicking and screaming into it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I just wanted to, it sounded like there was a little something more there that would help
No
me
worries.
understand you a little better. Okay. Well, so let's talk about this a little bit then, because it sounds like it could lead into your identity a little more. What's your sexual identity?
I'm bisexual.
Okay. What about your economic status or your background in that?
Upper middle class. I actually do very well economically, and have been pretty comfortable for a long time now. So, been lucky in that.
Okay. Are there any parts of your cultural or ethnic identity that play into your daily life or how you handle things, expectations, anything like that?
My parents are very traditional. Um, they immigrated from Poland, what, 70 years ago? So there are definitely certain holidays, Easter, Christmas, that can be a little intense. But otherwise, occasionally you have to do the polka if we go to a wedding, which my mom can't do anymore and my dad should not do. But because they're in their 90s. I mean, my God. But no, nothing too bad, nothing I can't handle, nothing I haven't done since I was a kid. Some of it can occasionally be a little bit, I guess I should say, nothing too bad. I mean, I sometimes it can be frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, it can be frustrating. What do you do that helps? What makes it better in those times for you? Is there anything that you choose to do during those times when you're frustrated, when things feel overwhelming?
Hmm. In the beginning, when they lived with me, sometimes when things got difficult, I would just go to the gay bar. It felt kind of spiteful, like it was being done out of spite, like when I was much younger and still lived with them. They would piss me off. I'd go hang out with my chosen family. It was a nice way of rebelling.
Yes, I'm hearing some spite, as you've said. Well, and you're at a stage where a lot of people are settling into who they are and finding about who they are at that point. Um, where are you at now with that? As you say, you're taking care of your parents again, and that's how you perceive them in the past. Where are you at with that right now? What do you do currently to manage
For
that?
self-care,
Yeah.
uh, I read, I meditate, and sometimes I do karaoke. It's fun to have a few drinks, have a few laughs, but there's still a lot. It's still a lot. It's it's hard to be a caretaker and also be myself, especially when the views between me and my parents are so different.
Yeah. Yes. You've mentioned that. Has caregiving brought up any past family dynamics or painful points that feel unresolved or difficult to manage now?
When I came out at 21, my parents kicked me out of the house. My older sister stopped speaking to me. And my parents stopped speaking to me for a long time. I put myself through school, got scholarships, did very well academically, and couch hopped for a short amount of time with friends of mine. At the time, which would have been 80s, at the time, AIDS was a big deal. So they were worried they were going to catch it because that was the message that the church was putting around. So we didn't talk for a long time. And now nobody else is going to take care of my parents. My sister is off getting drunk with whatever idiot she's seeing at the time. And I didn't want to be the one taking care of them. But I mean, no matter what, they're your family. And somebody's got to be the good person.
Mm. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Tell me a little bit more about your relationship with your parents. Are you the oldest sibling? Sounds like you mentioned one, a sister. What's this dynamic here we have? Are you the oldest taking care of your parents? What was your relationship before you moved back in with them? And what were you at that stage in your life when you had to go back and become the caregiver?
So for a long time, I didn't hear anything from them. About 5 years ago, my partner died. He and I have been together for 15 years. Um, he was my life. We we made a home together. We thought about building a family together. And he got sick and he died. And my mom started sending me Christmas cards. And that was it for a very long time. And then one day she invited me over for dinner. My dad wasn't there, of course. And we started talking and we started forming a relationship. She had decided that God wanted her to forgive me. Um, Now, she's my mom, so I'm willing to overlook how stupid that is because I am the one who, should be in the do I forgive them space, not her. But, she's still my mom. I have an older sister, and frankly, she's just a piece of work. She stopped speaking to me. She dropped out of college. She decided to be a party girl. And Yeah, now she's off, God knows where. I don't have any other siblings.
Well, you said you were you said you were raised Catholic, correct? Am I remembering that correctly? Okay. And it also sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, and I'm deeply sorry, by the way, that your partner has passed away.
Thank you.
Sounds like your mom has reached out when your partner passed away. Am I correct on that timeline?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so it would seem like your mom started reaching out when there maybe wasn't that piece of your life that she wasn't quite agreeable with. And that's a hard transition to manage because you keep mentioning she's still my mom, which if that's a value, family is family. It sounds like that's a value for you. So that can be frustrating in itself if, it sounds like your parents weren't taking your identity seriously.
Not at all.
No.
They kept trying to set me up with women. After my dad and I started talking again, which took a lot longer. Um, they would bring women over to the house or suggest that I go to church specifically to meet a woman. And I had to explain that, I'm not interested in seeing anybody, and it's probably not likely that it would be a woman, even though I'm open to whatever. But I, what was the question? I'm sorry, I kind of got lost in there.
It's okay. Um, Basically, how has this transition been from when you first decided to be the caretaker and, moved into now? You just mentioned that they used to make you do all these things, like try to meet a woman and everything. Like, has that calmed down? Has that evolved? Have you worked through that? Or are you still facing these kind of same issues that you did?
My dad was a very independent man. He was a welder. He was the head of the family. And now he's in a position where he's dependent on somebody whose identity he doesn't approve of and usually doesn't credit. It's a very helpless situation for him. So I think out of a lack of options, he chose to be on speaking terms with me. We're not particularly close, but I think we both have a mutual understanding that he needs me and that we both need to take care of my mom. She's always been a housewife and a Sunday school teacher. She never made any money because they were very traditional. So her identity is to take care of him. And the only way that she can do that is by depending on me. So I'd say the transition has been incredibly frustrating, but I care about my mom. And I think that my dad and I, as long as we don't talk about politics or religion or my identity, which pretty much leaves out, 90% of conversation, um, we can make it work.
And then let's go back to, where you live.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is the location where you live. Is it a place where you feel supported as an LGBTQ person and a caregiver? Or do you feel less support? Or, what's it like where you live?
So I'm in Bloomfield Hills. I can't believe that I can afford a house there, but hey, here I am. I feel safe there. There's a lot of people There's a lot of there's a lot of gays in the community, and we all take good care of our homes. We have a neighborhood watch. There's kids in the community too, and all the families are relatively nice. There's always those neighbors, those people in the neighborhood who, suck. But, for the most part, I feel safe. I do okay. I carry pepper spray on me just in case, because there's always that incident with that person who, you know, doesn't mind their own business. But I feel safe.
Mhm. Now, where you're living, did you go live with your parents to become the caregiver, or did they come live with you? Or what's that situation? Are they living in a home and you go to them? What's your daily situation like with that?
They moved in with me about 2 years ago.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding you correctly, so I didn't assume anything.
Sure.
How do you think what do you perceive they're doing with this transition? You know, they had to move into your home where you feel safe and supported. As in, as you mentioned, there's a lot of gays in the neighborhood. I'm not trying to be offensive with that, but how do you think their transition was? What did you see? How would you describe that? Like, were they angry? Were they hesitant?
Well, this is an interesting question. And, it makes me want to ask you a question because you and I don't have that much in common. And it's interesting. You would get along with my parents, I imagine, because I know you talked about, your religious background and so much. And I have nothing against people who identify as Christian. I've just had a lot of bad run-ins with people who happen to be Christian. So I wonder, and I'm just thinking of this as we talk about all these questions, I wonder about your level of discomfort being an issue and whether or not this is a safe environment for me.
Yeah, that is incredibly valid. And I'll be the first to say that I really am going to try my best to not have any ill will or bias or anything like that because honestly, I want to create my room, my sessions with my clients as judgment free as I can. Because, at the end of the day, everybody's human. Life didn't come with a rule book. We're all just trying to figure this out, as we go. My passion is to help people. So if you come to me, I'm going to try to do my best to help you. And I ask these questions in this way because sometimes it's a lot easier to understand something or a situation if every aspect was looked at it. Because in using your parents for example, the reason why I asked that question is because not only did you have a traumatic, hard experience with this, your childhood and growing up with your parents and discovering who you are and your identity, you then had to kind of uproot your life and their life to do something it sounds like you necessarily didn't want to do. So everybody in this situation is just probably full of feelings and frustration. And that's why I asked that question is I just want to make sure that I am understanding every point of view that I can so you don't feel like I can't help you. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense or do we need to clarify anything else?
No, that makes sense. I appreciate that.
Okay. Okay. Because the last thing I would want is you to be, uncomfortable or, anything like that. And it's a learning journey. Honestly, I'm hoping that you can help me learn some things so I can better help you and other people. So at the end of the day, that's all I'm trying to do. And I'm glad you brought that up so, we could clear the air and move forward with a more trusting, clear session so we can communicate and not feel like anything's wrong or anything. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you feel comfortable with me and we can continue to work together on, some of these really heavy things that are going on in your life right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, you know, I guess what's on your mind right now? Tell me more about what you're looking for during these sessions.
Well, I'm not as old as I used to be, and as old as I used to be, as young as I used to be. I don't know. I'm having a day, but I can't let things out the way that I used to. I can't go party. I can't I'm not interested in a relationship. And the friends that I have, they're getting older too. I mean, when you're 50 years old, like what do you do to get rid of the drama? You go to your support system. My chosen family, they have kids or they have careers or they have their own thing going on, and it's not like I can't ask for help. It's just that at this point in my life there's certain drama you don't want to bring up, and a lot of people are triggered by religion and politics, and when everybody has the same opinion that you do, you're not really getting anything out of it. So I want to be able to talk about this stuff and know that I can go a little bit deeper than the general conversation of, yeah, man, that's pretty messed up. Not that they talk like that, but, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Well, tell me more about that. Because it sounds like you're looking for maybe new communication techniques on how to talk to other people. Who are you? I mean, are you looking for ways to talk with your parents?
Yeah,
Or do you want to elaborate on that for me so I can understand?
sure. The older I get and the more time I spend with them, the more angry I get.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, my mom forgave me, but that doesn't necessarily mean I forgave her. And my motivations for doing it aren't because I feel like this calling or I feel moved. It's because I feel an obligation. So while I care very much for my mom, there's always a part of me that, you know, is that 21-year-old kid who got kicked out of the house. So the more time I spend, the more difficult the caregiving is, the more angry I get, and it spills into my work, which I've had to cut back on significantly. And I love my job, and eventually I'll have to put them in a home. And of course, I feel guilty about that, but I can only do what I can do, and I can afford to put them in a nice home, but it's still a home. I can't take care of them. I can't be there for them. A part of me is not capable of that because of what I've been through emotionally, and a part of me doesn't want to do that because of everything we've been through. But I feel like I have to.
So it sounds like maybe finding some new coping strategies for the right now. And it also
Yeah,
sounds like maybe some healing from the past. And that doesn't necessarily have to, because I think you mentioned forgiveness. It doesn't necessarily have to look like that. It can look like, it looks different for everybody. Healing from your past maybe will make the current of being a caregiver less heavy and daunting because you can I'm hearing a lot of maybe resentment
Mm.
from your past involving your parents, and that can definitely make the current right now hard to live in. Because how are you supposed to feel genuine taking care of your parents if in the back of your mind you're angry at them?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm thinking. That's what it sounds like to me, is that maybe you need some healing from the past and maybe some communication skills and how to talk with your parents who are so different than you currently right now.
Yeah.
Maybe helping figure out how to talk to them in maybe a way that they can open up to you better, if that makes sense. Um, because sometimes it can be hard to talk to somebody when they don't share your same views or if they're not open to your identity, a core piece of who you are. So you might feel like maybe you're not even being heard or listened to, or like I said, that frustration and anger is kind of in the back of your mind that makes communication really difficult with someone when you're starting it with like a defensive mode. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
when I say that, is there anything that comes to mind that you would like to work on communication wise?
I guess getting better at patience. I mean, I do meditation, but it's hard to find time for it when you've got, two old people that you're taking care of. My mom doesn't need as much care as my dad, but she's still, I have to remind her, there's certain things you don't need to do around the house, stay out of my business, because she's still very much a mom. So finding that privacy, finding that space to chill, it's hard. It's very hard. So yeah, I mean, maybe I need some work with, you know, finding a some kind of emotional, what's that word, boundary or something like that, just finding some way to, relax. Yeah.
Yeah, creating boundaries, um, schedules, routines,
Mhm.
uh, things like that are a must have for people who are in the caretaking role. Because you not only have to just take care of yourself and work, like you said, you might have to cut back on work, which we can get into that too in later sessions. I didn't forget. Because all of these things that you're taking on right now, they add up. And for everybody, it sounds like everybody in this situation is having just one hard, terrible time. And so if we can start communication like that on track, we can hopefully help you get somewhere where you're not having these intense emotions every time you try to deal with your parents. Like you said, patience. We can definitely work on patience and what that looks like for you in certain situations. And so, if we wanted to work on that, because I know you mentioned having more patience, so what would that look like for you?
I got this habit from my dad saying the first thing that comes to mind. And sometimes it's not very nice. Now, when I have to be a certain person, like at work, you have to be your professional self, or around friends when you get to be more of your actual self. that's a little easier to take the time to think about a response. And even if you respond the way you normally do, for people to go, oh, that's fine. I mean, at work, I have to be a little more aware of my surroundings because, like I said before, not everybody's accepting. But when I'm around them, things revert back to how they were years ago. And we say things that are hurtful without necessarily meaning to because it's just old habit. So I don't want the last years of their lives, even if we don't necessarily like each other, I don't want to know that I made that happen.